I cut way back on paying attention to the news cycle and watching political stuff because it just isn't edifying. But there's a few things I wanted to talk about because it's just been on my mind. And so my old boss, who I've worked with for many years, he's a friend of mine. He's over in Washington State now, and I'm in Arkansas, so we're pretty far away. And I don't work for him anymore, but we still have the text message chat going back and forth. And so he shared this particular thing with me the other day. It's an X post by ICE, which is showing them, I guess, tying up a protester in Portland and putting them on a flat cart at the Home Depot or something and rolling them away, right? So, I mean, you could look it up if you wanted to. It's kind of is what it is, right? And you could be on either side of the fence on, you know, where do you think we should stand in terms of how you enforce the law, things like that. But where I think this crosses a line is it's an official government agency, right? And it's posting something which is making fun of people. And that's not the purpose of a professional government agency. The government should be seemingly impartial. It should be working to create law, to interpret law, and yes, to enforce law, but not to create a narrative of public ridicule or to celebrate the denigration of human beings and treating people as objects, right? And you could say, well, you know, I'm going to justify this in some particular way. But the truth is you can't justify it, because when you start to reduce people to the level of saying that they aren't really human, they're not really deserving of any kind of dignity because they have a position that you don't agree with, that's a very dangerous place to be. And unfortunately, it seems to be a place where we find ourselves. And this is relevant to me because I didn't really go out of my way to look this up, right? I had it sent to me, just texted to me by a friend, someone who I would like to respect, but he thinks this is funny. He thinks this is something to celebrate. He thinks that this represents, in his mind, apparently, the best of America. This is the change that he wants to see. So this is actually a news video that I'm looking at here on screen. So like if we scroll down through this, right, just look at, you know, look at what kind of comments appear beneath that particular video that's, you know, talking about this this post that ICE made on X. You see, you know, various things like this individual here that says that's what I call taking out the trash. So, all right, so you've got a person on a shopping trolley, and you're rolling them out, and you're saying, well, you know, that's that person is trash, right? You know, it's here's someone that says that thing definitely doesn't own a brush or comb. It looks like I expected it would look. So again, you have someone here that is extremely comfortable going out of their way to imply that person is not actually a real human being. It's a thing. Here's someone says taking the trash to the landfill, right? Here's somebody else who says, I voted for this, with a cheering smiley face there, right? Here's somebody who says he should be dragged. So that person is saying, you know, it's not enough that this person was rolled away. He should be dragged so that he can be, I guess, subjected to maybe more injury or something of that nature, right? So, I rest my case. If you think that that kind of thing is funny, well, there's not really any excuse. There just isn't. Sorry, there's no excuse. Now, we can be on the left or the right. There's nothing wrong with being right-leaning or being left-leaning. I believe in a two-party system. If we could live in a perfect world, it would be probably, a three-party system where the middle way would have more of a voice. But the reality is life is kind of divided into that yin and yang, the male and the female, the conservative and the liberal, all that, right? So you have this pendulum which goes back and forth, and we vote one way or another, and sometimes the best way to create a balance between the two is to vote to the left and then vote to the left and kind of push things back and forth, right? And there's been a lot of things that I've been vocally opposed to that the radical left, the activist sort of people, have done, especially through COVID and all of those times, which, I'm not going to make an excuse for that. And I've seen leftists do a lot of things. Liberals will do exactly the same thing on the other side of the aisle, right? I've seen posts by liberals who are opposed, for example, to the whole Charlie Kirk thing, and people are saying, it's almost a good thing that he was killed, right? And that's a terrible thing to see. There's no excuse for implying that you support murder. There's no excuse for that. And if there's people who are liberal who want to make a spectacle and celebrate the death of a person, there's nothing to say other than that is absolutely beneath what it means to be a good human being, right? But then there's also it's like you can't be all the way to the left, all the way to the right. I think about the Charlie Kirk thing, and then I think about the big old thing that Donald Trump was doing to kind of memorialize Charlie Kirk, and then it turns into, again, the government is becoming the voice of things that should be private, right? Like, if it's a religious leader, well, that's not the place of the government to promote that. It's the place of people who are passionate about that particular individual to do as they wish in a free society. It's not the place of the government to rise up and tell the people what to believe, or to rally people against each other in a way that really pits one citizen against another. So all of this, it's quite disappointing to see that kind of thing. I found this other thing which I thought was interesting, and it also ties right in with the kind of thing I'm talking about. And this is it's a fake election notice going out to people. It looks like something of this nature has manifested itself from time to time. It's probably not official. It's probably some private individual who has decided to fabricate something which appears to be official election material, but it's really just some private entity that decided to print something and then mail it out in mass to people. But again, it comes down to it's a reflection of an attitude which exists in a very large and vocal subset of that particular electorate. And in this case, it says, we see you haven't voted yet. Your voting record is public. Your neighbors are watching, and we'll know if you miss this election. Republican Party officials will see if you don't vote, and you can't afford to have that on your record. So it's a threat, right? So again, I'm not talking about the legitimacy, like, is this official or not? Like, no, it's not official. It's a thing that has been sent out, right? But it's indicative of an attitude which exists, which pervades a big group of people who think that this kind of messaging is funny. It's that revenge spirit, that attitude of, you know what, I have a position, my position is right, and everybody who doesn't fall in line with it, they need to be controlled, they need to be punished, and we need to start making lists and punishing people who don't agree with our narrative. And that is something which cannot be allowed in a free society. It cannot be allowed if you are going to preserve a classical liberal democracy. Not liberal in the sense of like Democrats, but liberal in the sense of being something which is to some degree by and for the people, to some degree respecting of the fact that we can have many differences, but we have to have a safe middle ground where everyone feels respected at a base level. We can't allow that kind of thing. And so, you know, it just boils down to all of this kind of thing makes it extremely clear to me that, you know, I'm not going to think about this like all day, every day, and like go down the rabbit hole of watching tons and tons of videos about political stuff. It just isn't edifying. It's not really something I need to be doing. But we do want to be reasonably informed citizens to a point. And when we see something that's wrong, we probably should say something. And certainly when it's time to vote, we should vote our conscience. And hate should never be something that we view as conscionable. You know, there's a verse here, and it's just, you know, I thought of it, and it says it's the words of Jesus in Mark, and it's Jesus said, "Whoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he were cast into the sea." And I thought it's interesting because a lot of people, especially conservative Christians, will use this phrase as an example of why it's unpardonable and unforgivable to do harm against children. But Jesus in this scripture is actually not talking about children. He's talking about people who believe in him. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Especially if you're like me, you're an agnostic, you're not necessarily a religious person. Well, what does it mean to believe in Jesus in a more secular way? Well, I think it means to believe in the values that Jesus inculcated. And what Jesus taught was to forgive often and to show mercy. A lot of Jesus's teachings were a lot more in line with something you'd probably find in Eastern philosophy. He was not about chasing material things. He was not about being hateful or egotistical. He was about having a spirit of love. And there's a lot of people who will try to portray that the message of Jesus was something else because they're trying to push a narrative of their own, and they have their own idea of how you can say, well, we preach a message of love, but we also have a whole laundry list of exceptions to the rule. We should love one another unless they disagree with us. We should love one another as long as they're part of our political group or part of our tribe. But those same persons are going to be the people who are going to share that picture of somebody being trundled away on a trolley and think that that's funny, right? And that's not okay. It just isn't. I have one of the people in my class at work that's learning and training how to do the same job as me. She has been working for our company for almost a decade, and I learned that she has a citizenship test tomorrow. She'll be doing the test you have to do to formally become a U.S. citizen, and I'm moved by that. I'm proud to hear of that kind of thing, and she was trying to study for this so that she'd be able to hopefully do well at that. And you can just tell, like, that's very important to her. And it wasn't something we would go out of our way to talk about, but it was something that came up just because those of us who are trainees, like, we're spending a lot of time in the same room with each other for weeks, and so there is that getting to know each other, right? And the facilitator of my class was talking to her. They get along well. They've known each other for a while, and so he was talking to her about this, and he said, with all of the stuff going on, do you feel afraid? And she's like, yeah, I feel very afraid, and I just want to I want to get this behind me so that I can not be afraid anymore. And I was thinking about this. You have somebody who is living here in our country legally and working a respectable job for quite a few years, a person who's doing their part, trying to do everything they can to follow the process and to do the right thing, and not in any way at risk of being on the wrong side of the law. And yet she is feeling afraid, and just because there's that sense of you just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And there's so many people who have this attitude that it's somehow funny to be racist, or to think that harming other people in the name of bringing about some sort of positive reform is a thing to celebrate. And that's not the kind of values that we should be comfortable with in America. And I think about that Bible verse I was just reading. If you harm the least of these, it's better that a millstone was put around your shoulder and you were cast into the sea. And I think to myself, when I see people who claim to be Christians, people who say that they have this superior path that they think other people should follow, and then they embrace these attitudes that are hateful and egotistical and cause harm to others and cause other people around them to live their lives in fear because it no longer feels like everyday life is safe. Well, I think the people who have that kind of an attitude need to understand that message, that scripture about harming the least of these, it really applies to them. Because there's also a verse of scripture that says, if you do good to the least of these, my brethren, you did it unto me. And that's that when you show kindness to other people, when you work to uplift other people, when you try to make them feel seen and valued, then you earn the right to have those same virtues given back to you. Cast thy bread upon the water and it will return to you after many days. If you show kindness, you will reap kindness. But if you think that those kinds of toxic attitudes are okay, well, you are sowing seeds of hatred. And there is a point where it's important to call an audible on those kinds of things and say, no, it's not okay. And no, regardless of whether I lean to the right or to the left, I will not support any politicians in the future who seem to think that that kind of attitude is okay. And yeah, maybe that's not a big deal because we just vote every 2 or 4 years or something, right? But you know, when people think it's funny to say, oh, well, there's a list and we're going to, have a vendetta against people who, vote a different way or whatever. Well, I would say right back at you. If you think it's funny to joke about having a list and, harming people if they don't go your way, well, it does go both ways. And those people who have that attitude, well, it'll come back. Because every time the pendulum swings to the right, well, it's going to swing to the left eventually. And if you choose to fan the fires of division, then the pendulum, when it comes back the other way, it just swings all that much harder. And that's the concern, right? Because what we really need is that middle way. We need the moderation. We need that respect on both sides of the aisle. The willingness to follow the spirit of the law, but not the letter. The willingness to not be too certain that we are right, to try to have conviction, but also some flexibility to value and respect and cherish the human element. So, what is the takeaway? Because I'm not making this video to say like how you should vote or anything like that. Really, what I'm making this video about is to talk about the importance of having a spirit of gentleness, a spirit of kindness, and living that every single day of your life, and then let that spirit guide the decisions that you make. Wherever those decisions lead you, that's your business. But you need to start working on, your heart personally and privately, so that when you do make decisions to advocate for other people, or to be a resource for other people, or to be a source of encouragement to people, or maybe even to have a sense of, how do you want to cast your vote, or where do you stand on certain issues, or do you want to evolve your position and, change it one way or another. I was reading an article somebody had written on LinkedIn, and it was by someone who works for Walmart here in town, in Bentonville. And she said, I went to the DMV and I happened to be standing in the same line with Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart. And she said, it was this humbling kind of transformative experience, because, how crazy is it that you go to the DMV and you wind up standing in the same line with the CEO of the most powerful company maybe in the world, depending on how you judge it. It's just pretty crazy, right? And she introduced herself to him and took a photo with him, and it was this positive experience, and she shared that story. I thought that was a super cool story. But it's also a really moving story, because it just illustrates how you never know who you're going to cross paths with. You never know who you're going to share a room with. You never know whose life you're going to change for better or for worse. And when you realize that, And when you understand that every single position you have in life has a human consequence to either uplift people or to do harm. And when you understand how meaningful it is to set a good example and to be on the receiving end of generosity and good etiquette, when you really get it, then it's not an act. It's not a thing where you say, oh, well, you know, maybe I should act a certain way because I'm at work, or maybe I should, you know, be a certain way because, you know, it's gonna look good in a specific circumstance, or it's going to get me ahead in this particular way. You start to look at things genuinely through the lens of saying, I truly want to be the right kind of a person. I was thinking about how weird it is that when I go to sleep and I know I have to go to work the next day, usually I'll wake up like 5 or 10 minutes before the alarm goes off, and then I just get up and I go about my day. And then when I have nothing to do, then maybe the night before I say, oh, I'm going to get up early tomorrow on my day off, but I never do. Because somehow that subconscious part of me that has an internal clock knows I don't need to get up on that Saturday, right? And so then I turn off the alarm on my phone, and I turn off the alarm on my table, and I sleep in, and then I wake up later and I'm like, why did I not get up early? And you know why it is? It's because some part of me deep down inside knew I didn't need to get up early. And that's how it is with generosity and kindness and motive in our lives. When you don't really genuinely, on a subconscious, spiritual, deeply personal level, when you don't believe in something, it shows. And when you do believe in it, that also shows. When you truly want to do what's best for others, when you truly want to have a spirit of service, to have a spirit of kindness, to be a good ambassador, to be a light in the world, and you truly have a sense of understanding of why does that matter, to leave things better than you found them, to pay things forward, then your behaviors start to change to reflect that internal spiritual condition of your heart. And that's really what I was trying to get at. It's that you need to work on that. Like, we all need to work on that, to soul search and say, like, where do we stand on things? And are we looking at life through the right lens of humility and mercy and all of those virtues which uplift and do no harm? So there's that. And as I close this out, I would also say there's one more thing, and that is you've got to cut ties with the things that are familiar, but they always drag you back into those same old patterns. You know, it's like that person I was talking about who was sharing that post on X with me. Well, you know, we don't actually talk and chat very much anymore. And you know, the reason why, it's because it seems like 8 out of 10 times, whenever he has anything he wants to share, it's something that's along those lines. And that's not the person I want to be. And I don't work for him anymore. He's thousands of miles away from where I live, and I would never work for him again. Right? That's just the truth. And a big part of why is because that's not the kind of influence that I want in my life. When you have people who you see every day and they have those kinds of attitudes, even if that's not who you want to be, it's who you start to become. And it's really important to be in a place where you feel like the peer pressure that you surround yourself with is the kind that's going to inspire you to be the right kind of a person, not the kind that's going to reinforce negative spirits that aren't in line with the kind of person you should be. And that does mean sometimes you need to walk away. Sometimes you need to have the courage to leave a situation because it's not edifying. It's not going to build you up. It's not going to put you in a position where you're able to build other people up either. So all things considered, like, life has loveliness to sell. So buy it and never count the cost. We need to be people who see life through a glass half full perspective. We need to reach out to both sides of the aisle whenever we can. And we need to work to be good stewards of the blessings that we have been privileged to inherit. So, as always, good luck on your adventures. Till next time, thanks so much for watching.